Assalamualaikum. My name is Siti Aishah binti Muhammad. My ID number is 2020873686. Separation of powers is an organizational system in which duties, authorities, and powers are distributed among organizations rather than being held centrally. Associated with political system in which the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government are divided, the branches, on the other hand, are linked. They collaborate with one another while also preventing one another from assuming excessive power. As a result, separation of powers refers to the division of government responsibilities into distinct branches with the goal of preventing one department from performing the primary functions of another. It is to prevent the concentration of power and to establish checks and balances when one branch functions are used to contain and change the power of another. Because the making, enforcing, and administration of laws require the approval of three departments, it minimizes the possibility of arbitrary government actions. The history of power separation started when the Baron de Montesquieu, a French social and political philosopher, created the term trias politica, or separation of powers. His book, Spirit of the Laws, is regarded as one of the most important works in the history of political thought and jurisprudence. It served as the inspiration for the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the United States Constitution. According to his paradigm, the state's political authority is divided into legislative, executive, and judicial functions. His strategy was to show and define a system of administration in which power was not overly concentrated in the hands of a single king or other comparable regime. He stated that for these three authorities to be most effective in supporting liberty, they must be distinct and operate separately. He claims that each power should only do what it was created to do. When legislative and executive powers are merged in the same person or body of magistrates, there can be no liberty.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Aishah binti SARAPA. My student ID is 2020868968. I will continue with application of separation of power. So, as you can see, it can be divided into three parts, which is executive, legislature, and judiciary. For your information, the federal level, state level, and local government level are included in executive body. The parties involved are the Prime Minister and other cabinet members. The Prime Minister, who is the chief because he won the election, and cabinet members have a role to play in making government policy. Second, in short for legislature is Parliament's existence. One of Parliament's responsibilities is to alter the constitution. So, the primary constitution of parliaments are the YDPA, Dewan Negara, and Dewan Rakyat. Last is judiciary. Judiciary is fulfills responsibility in administering and managing justice evenly in this way. For this part, the YDPA heads the Chief Justice. The head of the judiciary is the Chief Justice, who is also the Chief Judge of the country.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is NURSHAFIQA ARIANI binti DAUD. My student ID is 2020469668. Now for my point, I'm gonna present about issue arising in separation of power in Malaysia. The first issue is the overlap between legislation and personal executive or membership. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong is the ceremonial executive and is a part of parliament. Parliament in Malaysia comprises Yang di-Pertuan Agong and two majlis. Minister come from parliament because minister make policies and draft bills. Once the bill reaches parliamentary level, members of parliament can support the minister proposal. The elimination of the party is used when there are several bills that are needed, such as important amendments. That means parliament suspend the right and freedoms of the people. The second issue is overlap between legislature and the judiciary. In this issue, there is no personal overlap, but there is some overlap in execution between the two organs. The legislature plays the role of the judiciary whenever there are several instances of violation of parliamentary privilege. The legislature will enforce it by setting its own procedure. Judge cannot make laws, but judge make laws through the doctrine of judicial president. Judge play a parliamentary role to make laws, and this can be a violation of the separation of power. The third issue is overlap between judiciary and executive. Judicial review is a way that can be exercised by the court to ensure that executive do not abuse their powers and as a means to uphold the rule of law. Judicial review by the court as a way of checking on executive is also said to be a kind of overlap between the judiciary and the executive. In Malaysia, the executive has always had control over the government, so much so it has affected the judiciary, being the weakest among the three organs. The power of the judiciary is also very restricted due to the recent amendment of the constitution. Members of the judiciary have a great link with the executive.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is NURSYAZA YASMIN binti ZAMERI. My number ID is 2020836102. The important separation of power is the first, to avoid the occurrence of duplication of jurisdiction from the same party not involved in the management of more than one given power. Therefore, the government Malaysia has determined the government's body that will be involved and responsible in implementing matters related to it only. The second important is to prevent the abuse of power as a result of the centralization of power in a particular body. This is because if all administrative power are placed in one administrative body only, it is possible for power-related problems such as abuse of power to benefit the parties involved and can also lead to oppression of annoyance people. The last is to allow the body to carry out its duty without interference. Indirectly, the separation of power will make it easy for three bodies to carry out their respective responsibility, and that is that there will be not more direct or indirect interface between each other jurisdictions.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm ADLINA binti RIZALMAN. My metric number is 2020472062.
In conclusion, separation of power introduced by Western political thinker does not contradict the concept of Islam. If examined, the practice of separation of power has already occurred in the system of government in the early days of Islam. What is practiced in Malaysia is the amalgamation of powers between the governing body and the legislature, while the judiciary exists separately from the two bodies and has the freedom to act in accordance with the provision of the Federal Constitution. Although the separation of powers seems to be idealistic and perfect in certain angle in Malaysia, it is not totally implemented in the government. The separation of power is not necessarily applied due to overlapping power between legislative and executive. This is the principle being applied in administration in Malaysia. Follow Constitution supremacy, which means everything must be practiced and followed in accordance with Constitution only, and anything in contrast will be declared null and void.